GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
This is Todd from the Horror Virgin wishing you a happy Halloween. And you're listening to the All Bets Are Off podcast with Robbie Vegas.
What's up, rock soldiers, and welcome back to the All Bets Are Off podcast. And as promised, this is the final girls episode, and I'm going to kick it over to my co-host for the day. Chaz is not here, but we have Mike Burns, who you're infamous on the show. We talk about you all the time.
Yeah, I mean, probably just from me bothering you, texting you at 3 a.m. about new metal bands. So that makes a lot of sense.
And then, of course, we read off your list and your wife's list for the Friday the 13th franchise. And you're like the authority in Western New York on horror movies. So, of course, you would be here today.
Sure. Yeah, makes complete sense. I probably, just for this list alone, I watched around 40 movies just for all these Final Girls lists to get my, official top 10 and the re-ranking of the Goliath.com top 10 list that we're going to be talking about. So, super excited. Anything horror is, what I'm all about. So, really excited to be here today.
Well, tell me what your initial impression of the main list was when I sent it to you.
The main list, first of all, as I was going through watching movies just for my list specifically, I tried to really dig deep into Final Girls, do a lot of independent stuff, a lot of unheard of stuff. And I was just so surprised at just how solid all of these, all of the classics were. Like Goliath has a lot of the classics, maybe one or two, lesser seen ones, but it's a really solid list. I was surprised myself that I didn't put, more deeper cuts on my list, just because there's a reason that these have staying power. They are just such amazing Final Girls and such, great overall movies that it's really hard to argue any of them. There's one on the list, maybe I do not really like the movie and don't agree with the Final Girl. And then another one that, it's meh to me.
Okay.
But the other 8, there's ones that are on my list that are on the Goliath.com list. So it's a very solid list.
So can I throw you a quick curveball and ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Where did horror start for you?
Actually, so I've always been a movie fan, but horror started for me when I really started to dig deep in everything, actually when I started dating my now wife, Darcy, when I was about 16, 17 years old. So I don't have a ton of early age, horror memories. I have a couple, but I really wasn't a fan of horror, and kind of probably was, the cool guy that, made fun of it throughout my teen years or something, until I started dating Darcy and then really sitting down and watching these movies. And the love started immediately after I bought her the Friday the 13th Crystal Lake Memories box set, and we went through the whole set together. And by part 3, I was just like, wow, I was completely wrong. These are amazing. Let's dig as deep as we can into this horror thing. And she kind of created a monster.
And now you're super into deep cuts too. You don't always just go with the well-known and the classics. When I say you're the authority around here on horror movies, I include your wife in that too. And you guys just know, the actors, the directors, the everything about these movies. So it all sparked from a classic slasher.
Absolutely. Yeah. From, Jason started it off, even though, I'll probably make a couple people groan into their Spotify right now, but I'm not Friday the 13th isn't really one of my favorite slashers at all, but that's what kicked it off. And I found through the convention circuit just all these awesome micro budget independent movies, and just the more I saw, the deeper I wanted to dig, and going through, and we have all these wonderful companies like Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, and Arrow, and Scream Factory that are digging even deeper than I ever have to, bring these classics to light and restore them, put them on Blu-ray for, a whole new crowd to see. And I'm in that crowd that's discovering these for the first time a lot of the times too. So
how many conventions would you say you guys go to or have gone to?
Well, it's tough for me. I work weekends. I've maybe been to like 20 conventions. My wife, Darcy, has been to 1 million of them. She goes to all the local ones, which I usually tend to pass up on just so I could go to the bigger like Horror Hound convention or Days of the Dead or throughout the Midwest, those type of conventions. But yeah, that when I go there, meeting the celebrities is awesome. I've only had like one so-so experience, and the rest has been absolutely, everybody's been awesome. All of the independent filmmakers I met have been awesome. Just there's just something that doesn't beat handing somebody cash and grabbing the movie from the filmmaker and being able to hear a story or two about the filmmaking. So conventions are they're just so much fun, and there's so much there, and it's just like all of our people in one place. It's hard to even find somebody that you don't care for at these events.
I was going to say the horror community, I've found, kind of like the metal community actually, are some of the nicest people that you ever come in contact with.
Absolutely.
And everybody's friends with everybody, and they'll go out of their way for you, and everybody wants to like introduce you to something new, and you want to do the same thing for everybody else. It's such like a tight group, even if you just meet somebody for the first time. It's so wild.
And even if there's like an argument on a movie or something, it's just like there's never any bad blood or anything.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you meet your shitbags anywhere. There's a handful in every single thing, but for the most part, everybody's there for one common goal. Everybody wants to celebrate horror, and I'm all for celebrating horror whenever I can.
All right, cool. Well, what do you say we dig into the list?
Let's do it.
All right, so starting with number 10. Number 10 on the list is Julie James, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And this hit me in the childhood. I remember when this came out, and I was so excited, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And that was around that time of like Scream and all that stuff. And that's when I was really discovering that I loved horror movies, and I was just a little kid. So this one holds a special place for me, and I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about your thoughts on it.
So my thoughts, when I mentioned there's one movie that I do not like on this list, I'm not a fan of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of Julie James as a final girl. I just think she's kind of very whiny, and I feel like the writing in it is kind of just like how a lot of these movies came after Scream that tried to do the same thing with all the TV actors and actresses and, the really, really clean cinematography and everything like that. And they just tried to copy Scream, and, they would even take Kevin Williamson, the writer, and, have him write these scripts. But when it comes to this one, this is just one I don't really agree with. It's too convenient. A lot of like the kills and how the killer can clean up so fast after them. Mm-hmm. And like, speaking of like the trunk scene with, I believe there's like either a body part or a body in there with all of the crabs and everything in it. And then literally less than 5 minutes passes and it's gone. And there's no trace of anything. I was just like, listen, I absolutely adore Scream. I actually adore the entire series, even 3 that people tend to poo-poo on a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a batshit crazy Scooby-Doo episode, part 3 to me. So I love Scream. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones that followed, they just tried to get on that kind of, that recipe that Scream had, but just couldn't get it. And I love Scream for revitalizing the horror genre. I just didn't really appreciate the kind of copycats that came after it.
So you would consider, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legends, things like that to be following in the footsteps of what Scream was doing.
Absolutely. And there's even a couple deeper cuts. Like that. I remember there's this movie, Lover's Lane, that came out shortly after. Valentine was early 2000s, even though I like it as kind of a campy slasher. And of course, a holiday slasher. I mean, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I'm still going to watch it on the 4th of July. My wife, Darcy, who we've mentioned a couple times, loves I Know and I Still Know. So I still watch them. I never have a bad time watching a horror movie. I still have fun with it. But, compared to all these other final girls, Julie James doesn't even come close to even my next least favorite, I would say. Okay.
So for me, I'm kind of the opposite, where this one is special to me just because I remember watching it so young, and I still enjoy it. But I think kind of for the same reason you don't like it is why I do, because I'm such a huge fan of Scream that when those movies started following, I was like, oh, I love movies like this. Because when you're, when I watched Scream when I was like 10 years old, then anything that's remotely close to that, you're going to like. It's the same thing as music when you're young like that. It's like, oh, it's kind of close to this band, so it's good enough for me. But
and for a young kid getting into it too, I mean, they're pretty clean slashers, and they do have thriller elements. And I can see, as a kid, I didn't see any of these very young, but I could see myself, if I'm like 10, 11, 12 years old, getting some knots or butterflies in my stomach when some of the more thrilling scenes happen. But I didn't have that with these movies, unfortunately. I saw Scream 3. That's probably why I like Scream 3. I saw Scream 3 back in the day because I had the soundtrack filled with nu metal. Yeah. It was one of the greatest soundtracks I had.
It's one of the greatest soundtracks of all time.
Yeah, so I appreciated the Scream series, and I mean, I saw the Scary Movie series before I saw any of these two, so that kind of ruined it a little bit and kind of highlighted the ridiculousness of I Know What You Did Last Summer for me even before I saw the actual movies. But I'm sure that has a lot to play that I don't have any nostalgia for it, and I just have my movie watching brain, as a adult watching it. Yeah. So unfortunately, that's the only one I do not like on this list, though. Like I said, the rest of the list is...
Before we go on, then, let's just clarify one thing, because we keep throwing around the term Final Girls, and if there's anybody listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, what would you consider the credentials to being a Final Girl? It should be cut and dry, but I feel like it might not be.
Yeah, I mean, Final Girls, you have to make it through the movie. Spoiler alert from my personal list. I have some honorable mentions that are honorable mentions because the girls didn't quite make it through the entire movie, but I just wanted to give them kind of a shout out. I mean, you don't have to be completely mousy to start off the movie, but you have to dig deep, find that inner strength in you. You have to gain some type of knowledge. You have to, just like go through the motions of trying to figure things out. You can make mistakes. Sure, everybody makes mistakes. And, you can't even put yourself in these situations because they're always extraordinary situations. That's why they make movies,
right?
To see these women in extraordinary situations. But, I mean, just gain strength. You got to be there at the end. You got to show some type of, just badass side to yourself. You can't be completely mousy and just, no pun intended, barely squeak your way through.
Get lucky.
Get lucky or and the thing is too, I know a lot of people expect them to be like the only person left at the end. You just gotta be the final girl.
Right. Yeah,
if somebody else survives with you, so be it. But if you're the main character and you are the final girl and some of your story is told and the writer and director obviously wants to center the movie around you, that counts for me.
Throwback to last week's episode with Leslie Vernon, they kind of brought to light what a final girl is in Behind the Mask. And I feel like that was one of the first times I heard that term, and they kind of broke it down and explained it as it went along. Ever since then, I kind of looked for it.
Yes.
So something to check out too. But let's move on to number 9 with Susie from Suspiria, and I'm talking 1977 here.
Yes. Man, I absolutely adore this movie. My second favorite from director Dario Argento, but wow, I just watched this 2 nights ago, and I almost forgot to watch it for this show, but I was, I have a shout out to Synapse Films, who put out the 4K scan on both 4K disc and Blu-ray, and wow, this, not even speaking of the final girl, this movie just looks amazing.
It does.
Even without all the colors, and all the changes in colors going with the Goblin score. Mm-hmm. Just the cinematography in it. I mean, Dario Argento famously has said that he doesn't put a lot of stock into writing plot or story as long as the movie looks amazing. That's what he looks for, and that's a very Italian thing. But Susie Banyan, she doesn't even start off small or mousy or anything. No. She, from the get-go, you could see the gears turning in her head. She's, trying to figure people out. She's trying to figure things out as soon as things are going down. She's trying to piece together, even when she first gets to the dance studio and sees, our first victim.
Yeah. Which is, in the movie itself is it has an eerie feel all the way through. Like, it never loses that, what's the word? It's just like your skin is almost like crawling the entire time because you're wondering what's going on, you know, and that's what grabbed me is through the whole movie. I'm going, I don't know where this is going, but I'm really freaked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it also doesn't hurt. I mean, Jessica Harper she's beautiful too. So like, and then, you know, she gains a friend in there that's also given her some clues, and it's super unfortunate that even though, you know, her friend's got some smarts and everything, that she ends up being a victim. But this movie all the way through, I believe it was her friend that tries to go through that attic and then goes through that window and then falls into the razor wire. And when that happens, oh my, with that, the score kicking in and all the colors going and just like her acting and screaming, and you see the slicing, and it's just that it from a movie from 1977 to be able in 2020 to still make my skin crawl like that. And there's not even a ton of gore in that scene. There's when she gets her throat cut by the killer at the end of that sequence. But wow, that movie and all, I feel like I don't watch it often, and I'm glad I don't, because I'm in awe every time I see Suspiria. It's truly a masterpiece, and, you know, definitely probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite Italian horror movies of all time. Just wow.
It's funny that you should say that you don't watch it that often, because I don't either. But when I do, I always enjoy it. But it's almost like, not that you forget about it, but it's like a sleeper. Yeah. You know? Like, you see people like wearing Suspiria shirts every now and then, and you're like, oh, really? I'm going to go watch that. Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's what triggers it.
Yeah,
you know?
you just see these scenes in your head, and you're just like, man, I really got to give that another rewatch. And oh my gosh. And even don't sleep on the remake either. The remake is, it's very different, because how are you going to, you know, remake something as great as Dario Argento created? But the remake's also great too. But getting back to just why we're here, the final girl is Susie Banyan. Just her piecing everything together, and by the end, you know, it's really, she's not facing one killer at the end. She's facing, you know, a coven of witches. Right. She's, you know, at the end she faces the main witch, which I guess she's kind of, because you got to kill the main witch and then all the other will fall. But, you know, that main witch has that protective layer of the hideout, you know, behind that office area that they have in there. And
cool scene.
Yeah, yeah. And when she's putting everything together, and then she finally clues in when she was trying to read her friend's, or the first victim's lips in the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
And then she puts it all together, and then, you know, turns the blue iris, the door opens, and, and everything's from there. And then you got, you know, them bringing her friend to life, trying to attack her. Yes. And then you have the owner of the studio and the one teacher, and then the butler's even in on it. And it's, you know, she's got a lot of people to go through to, you know, really make it to the end of that movie. And then, you know, burning the whole thing down at the end.
Right. Well, let's move on to number 8. We got Ginny Field from Friday the 13th Part 2. And I know that you're going to have a lot to say about this one. And honestly, I like this movie so much. I really do. And I like her as a final girl so much. But this whole list was hard for me because where you said there was one that you didn't like and one that you were kind of iffy on, I like them all. So as I'm going through this, I'm like, oh, this is such a great list. I don't know where to put this person. Oh, this is such a great list. And this is one that I struggled with because it really was one of those classic final scenes where you're like, oh my God. Put yourself in her shoes just for 2 seconds and you're like, oh my God.
Man. And that's the thing. And she's, she said she was going to school for child psychology or something. Yeah. So, I mean, she's already from the beginning of the rumors of the campfire tale that is Jason Voorhees, she's trying to get inside his head just from the legends. Yes. So, I mean, she's already got a step up on Jason before anything even goes down. So I absolutely love this movie. This is my absolute favorite Friday the 13th movie. And actually, I do want to give a shout out to Micah because I remember on his Friday the 13th list, he had part 5 as number 1. Yeah. And I absolutely agree with everything he has said. But the only reason that puts 2 ahead of 5 for me is the final girl. Okay. 5's final girl is, you don't even know who the final girl really is until about halfway through the movie. Yeah. But I mean, Ginny she just has everything you need in a final girl. She's strong. She's smart. She's a cute girl. She has
that level of innocence.
Yeah, that level of innocence as well. Absolutely. And I mean, like, and this is where you really find out where it kind of breaks the mold of, because she does go to the bar. She has a few drinks. You know, you don't have to be this complete virgin that doesn't do drugs in order to be the final girl.
Right.
Like, you can have a drink, you know, you can have a joint, you can do whatever and still survive until the end. And it's not to say she doesn't show moments of vulnerability, because, you know, there's a scene to where she is hiding from Jason and trying to get away from him, and she wets herself.
Right.
So, I mean, like, she's still terrified at the same time, but that doesn't stop her from thinking of how to get out of the situation, and just the genius idea of trying to get in his head at the end with throwing the sweater on,
yes,
and trying to block his view of Pamela Voorhees' head on the table behind him. Yeah, it's just like, she is, you know, the exact, you know, definition of what I feel a final girl is, and what I feel people should look for in a final girl.
And you know, too, is the movie is obviously iconic because it's the first time we see Jason as a killer.
Oh yeah, sackhead Jason.
Yeah, and that gives you a certain level of this girl's a real deal too, because of that alone. You know, you're finally seeing she's not. And this is no knock to Pamela Voorhees, because she was a badass.
Oh yeah,
but Jason is a big dude.
Yeah.
And this girl has to take him down.
Yeah.
It's not the same as Pamela. You know what I mean? Although she was a psychopath, she's not the size of Jason.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good reason to put her on this list.
Absolutely.
So that kind of leads me a good segue here, because number 7 is actually Alice from Friday the 13th. Yeah. So they're back to back. And Alice is the final girl, although she does get murdered in the beginning of part 2 immediately.
Yeah, I don't know why that's one big gripe I have against Friday the 13th, is they build up these strong characters and either completely disregard them in the next movie, or just like they did with Alice. Even though this is the pick that I said is kind of meh for me. She's kind of a dry character. I don't know. I don't put it on the actress. I think, you know, it's more the writing of her. You don't have the backstory of who she is like you do with Ginny. You don't have a ton of like one-on-one dialogue scenes like you have at the scene at the bar with Ginny, with her and Ted.
Yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't have as much of a problem with this list if Ginny and Alice were swapped. Okay. But, you know, I feel like she's on this list just because they did have Ginny, and, you know, just because I feel like Alice was the first doesn't mean she's the best.
Right. Kind of like the first Korn album?
Yeah, absolutely. Even though I have a special place in my heart for that Korn album. But
I just had to throw
that new metal list. It didn't belong number 1. I agree, but
no, I like Alice specifically because I love the franchise, and she was the one that kicked it off.
Yeah. I mean, you got to. If she was maybe, you know, next to Julie James, maybe number 9, I could see that. But as a character overall, I think there's even another Friday the 13th final girl that's even better. I mean, I would probably put Tina in part 7, you know, the telekinetic girl, the Carrie wannabe. I would even put her over Alice probably.
Carrie wannabe,
Yeah. But I mean, you know, she's the first. She kicked off the Friday the 13th series. Everybody, you know, people adore that movie. It's kind of hard to put too much of a gripe for them putting her on the list, but...
And they did well with a low budget, so maybe we would have gotten more of a backstory had they had more time and more budget. We don't know.
Yeah,
so,
I can't even think about who wrote it, but I mean, I feel like it's more of the writing, and when it comes to horror movies and low budgets, like, my big rule is because I watch movies that have been made for, you know, a couple grand in somebody's backyard, right? And the only thing I will not take an excuse on is it's free to write a great script.
Yeah.
You don't have to, to get an amazing established writer costs a ton of money, but to write a great script yourself, that's completely free.
Right.
So, you know, maybe they could have made her a little stronger, you know, and I feel like she was kind of whiny. And then there's this scene that I always have a problem with in the first Friday the 13th, to where, like, she's back in the house, the power's off, the house is empty, and she's just, like, walking around doing nothing. She, like, picks up a guitar, starts playing the guitar, and I'm just like, what are we doing here? But, you know, I still, it sounds like I'm like crapping all over this movie. I love the Friday the 13th series. The Friday the 13th, the original, if I'm ranking, you know, like you did a few weeks ago on your podcast, I think it was like right in the middle of my ranking of the series. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's anything amazing. I think, you know, some of the movies got better as they went on. But as a final girl, Alice is very, very, you know, middle of the road to me. But I don't fault them for putting her on the list.
Well, that kind of leads me into the next one, who is Sally from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and she deserves to be on this list because that movie is brutal.
Yes.
It is brutal and uncomfortable to watch. Like, if you're starting somebody off on horror movies, probably not the one that's going to get them into horror movies because it's a hard watch when you first see it for the first time. Like, mentally, you're just like, wow.
Yeah. Like, my favorite quote about this movie is from Rob Zombie, and he says something to the fact of, like, did Tobe Hooper get actors, or are these just crazy people he put in this movie? Because everybody in this movie is insane, and they're just so, like, out there that it's like, these actors, it's like, these aren't actors. These people are really like this. These people are really crazy. And this woman is put through absolute hell throughout this movie. I think she's ranked a little high just because of the ending of the movie. I feel like a final girl should gain some type of strength at the movie. It's like, yeah, you could be kind of broken at the end. You know, you've been through, especially her, has been through, just like everything with just that dinner scene. And, you know, they tried to replicate it in every Texas Chainsaw movie afterward, and even some other, like, exploitation movies. It's never going to get as good as Tobe Hooper's original from 1974. But, yeah, she just, like, I feel like they broke her at the end, though.
Yeah.
Like, she snapped. Like, she's never going to be the same ever again.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't really gain any strength or anything. She got out of the situation, yes. You know, with the help of, and luck of a pickup driver driving. But even when,
didn't kill Leatherface, or...
Yeah, didn't kill Leatherface, you know, and the thing is, even the wound on Leatherface was from himself tripping himself up. You know, she even got that trucker killed at the end. And it's like, while, she got out of the situation, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, you know, when, you know, somebody just squeaks by. Yeah. She belongs on this list. Absolutely.
Just from the torture alone.
Just from the torture alone and her being able to get away. And, I mean, it takes an immense amount of strength to get away from, just like I was saying with Susie Banyan, you're going up against an army. You're going up against, you know, how many people in that family.
Yeah, right.
So,
And still,
I think she should have been a little lower on the list, but absolutely, I think she needs to belong on this list. Just that, oh man, that movie's intense. People ask me, you know, they always, because I'm, you know, the horror guy, they always ask me, you know, your top 5, top 3 or whatever. Texas Chainsaw is always 1 or 2. Okay. Like, it's always either, you know, it's ever so rotating depending on what mood I'm in, but it's always 1 or 2. That movie is just...
So, did you like the remake? With Jessica Biel?
When I first saw it, I did not like it. There are just certain things, but as I see it,
grows on you.
It really does grow on me, and I thought I liked the sequel to it better, but as I always watch them back to back when I watch them, and I keep liking the remake more and the sequel to the remake less.
Gotcha.
So it's it really has grown on me. You know, you can tell they have the original cinematographer. It looks grimy. It looks dirty. Yeah. You know, a few critiques here and there, but it's such a classic movie. And like I said, it's one of my all-time favorites. So it's so hard to get that out of my head because I know it so well. And I know what I want the remake to be, but it's growing on me. But, I think if I were to rate it, you know, it'd be like a 3.5 out of 5 stars or something like that.
That's pretty good.
Perfectly serviceable remake. For sure.
I'll tell you, I asked you that because I'm the same way. Yeah. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, like, it's already a good movie. Like, what are you doing? And so I guess I was kind of against it to begin with, so I probably didn't give it a fair shake. Yeah. And then as time went on and I saw it a few more times, I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. Yeah.
Like, there's always a scene in that movie that actually, like, kind of makes my stomach sink a little bit. And it's that scene where they're in the dark, they're just hanging out in the van or something, and Leatherface just shows up. Yeah. And then they're running from him. There's all this commotion and everything. And then when everything's slowed down and then he turns around and he has Jessica Biel's boyfriend face on his face, and you can tell it's her boyfriend's face. And like that moment when he just turns around slowly and you just see this like melting looking face on Leatherface's face, it's just like, I remember seeing it for the first time, and that scared the shit out of me.
Right. Well, let's go on to number 5. We got Nancy Thompson from A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I love this movie so much, and it's such a classic, and it's so well done, and Robert Englund is the man. Nancy is, well, she's definitely everything a final girl should be. Yes. But there's points in this movie where I get so annoyed with her.
Yes.
Where I'm like, you sound like a whiny little kid, and it kind of bothers me. Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, come the end of the movie, she was great, and she did everything she was supposed to do. And she really sacked up and, you know, went after Freddy head first. And,
that last scene of her home aloneing her house and just like going at Freddy and just trying everything, like kitchen sinking it, and like, you know, I just have a big problem, and I know it's not Wes Craven's fault, but it's because I know the producer Bob Shea, they had a couple endings in mind, and Bob Shea came up with the dumbest idea of throwing every ending in there. And the thing is, why I have a problem with her on a final girls list is, does she get away at the end? Because the end, the car drives off. She's in a dream. Her mom gets sucked in the house. Right. You go to part 3, and she's on Hypnocil, which is, you know, the fictional dream suppressant, you know, an experimental drug. And it's like, if she has to suppress her dreams and she's in a dream at the end, does she get away?
Right. I could see that too. And in my mind, like, I want to say yes, she did. And that when you watch the original, you're like, oh, well, that was just like kind of like a Friday the 13th ending. Like, they're not real endings. Yeah. And then the third one, like you said, puts it back in, and you're like, oh, yes, it was. Yeah. But then it's hard to say because they didn't write the first one thinking the third one was going to loop Nancy back into it. Yeah. So I really don't know. Later years watching it, I don't think she got away. I think everybody that was in that car is gone or killed or
especially
something.
When you put even part 2 into perspective, because they say she went crazy. Right. So she went crazy, and I feel like if you're going concurrently, you have part 3 come along, she gets there, she's on Hypnocil, and you can't put her as a final girl in part 3. Right, yeah. So, I mean, if they were to throw her from Wes Craven's New Nightmare, who I feel like a lot of horror fans are split on that movie. I feel like it was Wes Craven's trial run for Scream with the meta in the script. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if they put her from Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which I feel like everything about her character, Heather Langenkamp's acting, like, I feel like everything when it got to that movie got better. Okay. So, absolutely, if they put New Nightmare, but I don't know, from A Nightmare on Elm Street, listen, I love the movie, classic movie. Does she get away? And then you take the sequels into account. It's hard to officially say she is a final girl, because even at the end, isn't everybody in the car at the end?
Yes, everybody is.
Yeah. So she survives with all her friends. So it's gotta be a dream, because they all died.
Right, they all died.
Yeah,
right.
So I just have a hard time with that movie, and I don't know, it's, when it gets to me, like a lot of dream logic, or like even like a lot of movies with like time travel and stuff, it's when they set their rules in the movies, it's kind of hard. You have to follow the rules that were set. Mm-hmm. And if you're following the rules that they set in this movie as a standalone movie, I don't think she gets away.
That's true. That's a very good point. So, because you think the movie's over at the end when he, you know, falls flaming on top of her mother. Yeah. But that last little sequence is like, maybe not. Mm-hmm. And I think it was supposed to be left open-ended.
Absolutely,
originally.
Yeah. And I think it's great as a standalone movie. But when you're having a list of the greatest final girls, I mean, I wish they would have prefaced the list of the rules of a final girl. So, yeah.
Well, up next we have number 4 with Aaron Harson from You're Next.
Oh, I'm so happy they had this on the list.
Me too.
Oh, good Lord.
I feel like this movie's underrated.
Yes, absolutely. She is just...
She's badass.
Yes, so badass. And actually, I was talking about this movie with my wife, Darcy, and she was saying, because she had it ranked a little low on her list when I looked at her list at the first, and then, you know, we go back and forth and argue all the time about horror movies. So I was just like, why so low? And she got to the point to where when everything was kicking off, she had a little help. Okay. She had the mom, she had the dad, she had the brother, played by Joe Swanberg.
Yeah.
Even though he had an arrow in him, he's still kind of strong, the strong guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, she had a little help to start, but a lot of these other final girls did too. Like in Friday the 13th, I mean, you know, you have how many camp counselors that are trying to get away from Jason and everything. But yeah, I completely agree. She is so badass in this movie. And then, you know, her boyfriend, played by AJ Bowen, he didn't even know her as well enough to know that she had grown up on a survivalist camp.
Okay.
So it was just like, when you find that out halfway through the movie, then you're now I'm expecting some Home Alone stuff.
Yeah,
now I'm expecting some gore. Now I'm expecting it to ramp up, and it doesn't disappoint. And she just gets more and more and more badass as it goes on. Unbeknownst to her that some of the family members are in on this.
Right.
You know, she's even trying to teach these family members, not knowing they're in on it, you know, what to do to get away from these people invading this home. And wow, just badass. Just badass. Sharni Vinison is just amazing in it.
But this movie, I don't know why it is, but I feel like it's just not known enough. Like, I do feel like it's a sleeper, like it's underrated.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's people just were like, I'm not going to bother with that one. It's just another whatever. But I honestly, if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this podcast, like, check this movie out. This is a movie to watch.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah. I think it suffered from the fact that it didn't get a lot of press. It didn't, like, when it came out, it was only in theaters for like a couple weeks, and it was, I actually remember when it was getting buzz on the festival circuit, and sometimes that can kill a movie. Mm-hmm. You can get festival fatigue. People are sick of hearing about it before they even see it already.
Gotcha.
When it comes to the people you want to support it the most, which is the horror crowd and the festival crowd.
Right.
And the thing is too, there's no big name actors you can attach to it. And the thing is, I got really confused, and this might be a personal thing with me, and you can probably co-sign on this, but with the animal masks, the Wyatt family, their promos were just starting in WWE, their packages.
Yes.
We didn't even know who they were at the time. And I was thinking in my head, I thought it was a WWE film.
Oh,
just
really?
because the masks were exactly the same at the time. And I was just, you know, WWE had put nothing good out at that point.
Yeah.
So I was just like, well, why am I going to go to see this? I'm not knowing anything about it. And then hearing the festival buzz, and I'm just like, I know what festival buzz is. You're seeing it with a crowd. You're seeing it before everyone else. Yeah. Of course, you're going to have a little bit more reverence for it when you see it.
Right.
But I mean, I wish, and I just wish it would have been more successful. Trust me, Adam Wingard's doing fine. He's doing the new Kong vs. Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
So he's got some money in his pocket. But absolutely, completely underrated. Not within the horror crowd, but within, like,
just in general.
Yeah. In general, you know, all these other movies everybody's heard of, you know. A lot of the normies have heard of. So it's just like, people have got to get out there championing this movie. And this final girl, I'm so happy to see her on a list like this. And, you know, this is probably their very contemporary pick that they really wanted to throw in there too.
Right.
You know, good on them. Good on Goliath.com for, you know, going a little bit outside of the box and, you know, allowing something not from the 70s or 80s on the list, or something that's, you know, under 20 years old. Right.
Well, the next one is extremely well known. This is going to be Ripley at number 3 from Alien.
Yes.
I'm a little harsh on this one. Not that I don't like Alien, because I love the movie.
Yeah.
I think it's just from people pounding into my head all the time that you have to love Ripley, that I'm like, fuck off.
Yeah.
I will decide.
Yeah, a little bit of fatigue.
Right. I hear about it so much, and I don't know. I don't mind that it's a sci-fi horror. Like, that doesn't bother me. You know, Phantasm's a sci-fi horror, and I love that.
Oh, yeah.
But I really am just, like, worn out on hearing about Ripley. So, to me, great movie. I will, hands down, always watch this movie, but probably going to rank a little low on my list.
Oh, no. I think this is in a perfect spot.
Okay.
I think,
we're going to have very opposite lists.
I know. But, yeah, I think she's absolutely in the most perfect spot. She is so strong, especially, I mean, and I'm taking the other movies into account because it's a continuation of her story. Maybe not 4, even though 4 is a popcorn flick that, you know, kind of a so bad it's good. I really enjoy it. But, God, Ripley, especially in the sequel, I would more so say, like, when you go through everything you've been through, like, why would you go back? Like, and she goes back, like, yeah, she's kind of forced to, but at the end, like, that's almost certain death. Yeah, that you're going back to. And the thing is, Alien, you say I think the only thing that makes it a sci-fi movie
is it's in space.
It's a slasher.
It is a slasher.
Like, it's a slasher. Like, it's an alien going...
It's an alien slasher.
Yeah, it's one alien, one thing going after all of these people. And, dude, that table scene alone, when... Another thing I like about it, too, is, like, the camaraderie between everybody. Just that you get to know everybody, you get to know their personalities and kind of how they roll and who they are, just with that big... I think every movie that has a lot of characters like this needs some type of meal scene like that, to where you can get dialogue between people. Yeah. You know how everybody feels about everybody else.
Yep, agreed.
You really get a ton of personality and characterization, and, like, kudos to the writing on that. But yeah, I think she's in a perfect spot. She has survived, if you're getting into it, 3 movies, and the only reason she dies is because in the 3rd movie, depending on which cut you watch, I think, she kills herself.
Right.
So, like, yeah.
And, too, I do have to give her the credit of when she kicks it into gear, she's extremely badass.
Yeah.
I 100% agree that she's in the top 10. That's not in question for me. And again, like I was telling you earlier, I don't have a problem with any of these 10. So to me, they're all good. I'm tired of people just shoving it down my throat that you have to rank her in your top 3 or your number 1 or
I get it.
Whatever.
That's probably how I am with, Alice Hardy from part 1, or like from Friday the 13th part 1 in general. It's just like it's the first one. You have to. It's like, no, I don't. I don't really have to.
Exactly.
Like, just because it's the first one.
So I think I'm just kind of bitter. Yeah. Because everybody keeps trying to force it on me. And Absolutely. This is a shout out to Chaz.
Oh, there you go. I opened mine before. There you go, Chaz.
So, I don't know. Like, again, I'm not going to say that it's completely like a bad spot or she shouldn't be in it, but I'm so tired of going to like conventions or like whatever, and everybody's trying to like force feed me.
Understandable. And the thing is, if you're not like super into the sci-fi thing, and the thing is, you think of Alien, you think of the sci-fi like green colors and blue colors, and like, it's not as dark as like, a lot of the other horror movies. And okay, I get it, and especially because the second one's a straight up action movie, and the third one is like straight up sci-fi action, and it's, the only one that I would really throw into horror is this one, and maybe the more recent Alien Covenant into like horror thriller area, but it's not a horror series. I can get that, and the fatigue is real. I hear about I have a couple of close friends that are obsessed with the Alien series, so I get it. But I also love the series too. It's not one kind of like Suspiria. I don't go back to it all the time, but every time I go back to it, I'm just like, God damn, this is great. And I go through the whole series because I enjoy them all.
Well, not to stray too far from the topic we got here, this could maybe be a debate for another show, but are you in the group that considers Predator a horror movie?
Oh, man. You know what?
I feel like it's an action movie.
Here's the thing. I don't think slasher is exclusive to horror.
Okay, so you kind of took
Predator
what I was going to say.
Slasher.
Because it's a slasher, but it's an action movie. I think the same
as Terminator. Terminator's a slasher.
Yes.
Yeah, he uses guns mostly and everything, but like when you have like a single like, a slasher, I don't think slasher is exclusive to horror. But yeah, I think Predator's a slasher. It's an action movie. And the thing is, there's not many jump scares. There's not a ton of like, I don't know. It takes place during the day too, and you got Arnold and I'm sorry, what's the actor that plays Creed? Apollo Creed. It's got him in it,
and Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura. I mean, you got action stars. Nobody tried to market it as a horror movie. Alien vs. Predator, sure, sci-fi horror.
Yeah,
but I think that's where a lot of people get the horror from, is like the AVP series.
Yeah. But, you go to a convention, you're going to see Predator stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love Predator, man. Like,
Me too.
Arnold's lines in that are so classic, but yeah.
Well, see, now we're getting in the top 2.
Yes.
And to me, the top 2 are similar in a lot of ways. So I'm not going to talk about them both at the same time, even though it sounds like I'm going to. Yeah. So number 2 is Sidney Prescott from Scream. And I can't say enough about Sidney.
Yep.
I think she is amazing. Ultimate final girl.
Yes.
And what a turnaround as the movies go.
Yes.
Like, she just keeps getting more badass, smarter. and she really like reels in and knows what's going on. And I like that for the first few movies, they always talk to Randy about what to expect.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's really cool.
Randy,
and,
the fan favorite.
Yeah,
man.
right.
Gotta
right.
love Randy.
And Scream is one of my favorite movies, and kind of like you were saying, the whole series is.
Yes.
Like, I don't mind number 3 is, even though a lot of people shit on it.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's really well done and put together well, and I think it's clever, and I think it's fun.
It's a fun Scooby-Doo romp. Yeah, there's a few things that don't make sense, but I mean,
that's horror.
There's also there's also the whole thing too of, as the movies went on, Kevin Williamson, the writer, kept getting kicked off the set, and I think they completely kicked him off the set and rewrote his script for part 3. So like there's a ton of studio interference. The Weinsteins are infamous for, you'll be on set and they'll call the director and be like, hey man, change this right now while they're shooting. Gotcha. And it's just like, there's, when it came to Dimension or the Weinstein Company, Rob Zombie talks about it all the time, the things he went through with his first Halloween movie. And then by the time he got to his second one, he was just like, I'm doing what I want.
Yeah.
If you want me here, you're paying for me and my artistry. So I'm going to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So, I know there's always, rifts between producers like that, especially when the Weinsteins were involved, and it's not somebody like Quentin Tarantino who they just let do whatever he wants.
Right.
But yeah, I completely agree with you about Scream, the whole series. Sidney Prescott,
4-time final girl.
Yeah, and she is extremely unassuming. She seems, even to start off, she seems weak. She's broken. She's and loses a parent in high school to a brutal crime, and that's something that I can personally relate to. And just like, holy shit, just like being broken like that on top of a year later having to go through what she's going through.
Right. And
the people closest to her are at fault for it, even if you go back to her mom being at fault for kind of the life. I'm not victim blaming. I'm saying for the life that she led her down a road to put her in a situation. I'm not saying it's her fault she got killed, but for kind of bringing on some type of turmoil for her surviving family to really have to deal with years down the line. And wow, yeah, 4-time final girl, and she gets stronger and stronger as the movies go on, even when there's a 10-year lull between 3 and 4.
Yep.
I'm one of the people that I think 4 is just as good as 1 and 2.
I put 4 right next to 1.
Yeah,
I really do.
I think, and again, I know there was a ton of scenes cut out and a ton of stuff that wasn't used. They were supposed to go harder on the remake angle, having scenes like in front of the fountain with the kids disgusting slashers or remakes instead of slashers. And there was a ton of stuff left on the cutting room floor that I feel like could have been put in a director's cut and made it a little, hit you over the head a little more, kind of like the first one just hit you over the head with, we are horror fans and we know what we're doing as it, pertains to the movies.
First movie is perfectly cast.
Yeah.
It's a nod to everything that's horror before it.
Yes.
Straight down to Wes Craven wearing the Freddy sweater as a janitor.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of a cheesy scene, but I appreciate it every time I watch it.
You get the Fonz in there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's... No matter how many times I watch that movie, I love it like I never saw it before.
Yeah. And they make everybody a red herring.
Yeah.
Even like sly shots to the police officer from A Nightmare on Elm Street. They pan down to his boots, and it looks like he has the same boots as the killer.
From the bathroom scene.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, there's just, when he puts his cigarette out. And, there's just so much great in the first Scream movie. As a slasher and as it, 1996 at the time, I feel like the 90s kind of also get shit on too much, but when it comes to popular horror movies being put out in theaters at the time, horror was getting stale. There was slasher fatigue. Everything was getting too goofy and everything, like I said with, the writing earlier, the writing was just off the map. Nothing made sense in most movies. So, and then Scream just kind of brought it back. Yeah, Wes Craven's like, I'm going to do simple. We're going to do a slasher, but we are going to do all the callbacks to those, but we're going to make it its own. They made the blueprint for the, really, really clean looking, shiny cinematography and, getting, all these TV actors in this big blockbuster movie. And it's like one of those rare movies at the time that got word of mouth.
Yeah.
And just it didn't do gangbusters its first week, but it kept getting bigger.
Yes.
And bigger and bigger and got released around Christmas. For
Yeah.
a slasher to do that around, it's no wonder it's got, you know, a 5th sequel on the way. You
Right.
put it out on Christmas and it, you know, gains that much, that many fans and that much love. It's, you know, and Sidney Prescott right at the center of it, you know, played by Neve Campbell, and even her friend, Tatum in the movie, played by Rose McGowan.
Yeah.
She's even a super strong character,
Yeah.
even though, she kind of does everything right.
Yeah, she
even
does.
in her death scene. And it's just like, there was just no way out for her. So,
I like that Ghostface is now one of the most iconic characters in movies too.
yeah.
You don't see that with like I Know What You Did Last Summer, like
Yeah, with the fisherman.
Yeah, like that's not
yeah.
one of those things.
And
but
it's just a
Ghostface
guy
is.
in a Halloween costume.
Yes, that's
It's not a
Which-
supernatural killer.
right, and the
Yeah.
costume existed. Like they didn't invent this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I had
They altered the mask a little bit.
Yeah,
but
that's about it.
it was already a thing. Yeah, they bought the rights to it and made it their own. And
now it's Ghostface.
yeah, now it's
you know?
Ghostface. And, you know, you're not going to see, you know, if you live in a village, you're not going to, you know, see a gaggle of trick-or-treaters without a Ghostface mask in there.
Agreed, 100%. This movie will forever be hands down one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Absolutely. I
So-
mean, you know,
It saved the slasher.
yeah, it saved the slasher and revitalized it for more to come. Even though I'm, you know, not the biggest fan of the ones it really brought on, but I think it saved horror.
I think it did too.
Yeah,
I
it
think
saved
that was a
horror.
revitalization.
It saved
period.
horror for theaters.
Yes.
So now we, you know, at the time people weren't spending money to get, you know, things out there quickly or anything. But then after that, when they saw the money it was making,
Yep.
copy and paste.
Yeah, right,
Let's
right.
throw all these movies in theaters right away.
Well, that brings us to number 1. It's a long road, but we got here.
Yeah.
Laurie Strode, Halloween.
I mean,
The first final girl.
yeah.
If you really think about it.
Yeah.
Like, at least, okay, let me reword that. She wasn't the very first final girl ever in a horror movie.
Yeah.
But she's the one.
The
that-
first slasher,
the slasher
final girl.
final.
Yeah.
So, and still, kind of like Sydney, super badass.
Mm-hmm.
Every time she comes back for one of the sequels, equally badass, more knowledge, and more ready to fight, right up
Yes.
until the newest release of Halloween.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah. And, you know, talk about character development across a bunch of movies. And in the newest one, you know, I wish they could have found a way to incorporate Part 2 and H2O in it, because I think my favorite iteration of these movies is 1, 2, and H2O, because I think she's actually a stronger character in H2O than in the newest one.
Yeah.
Because that scene in, and I'm going to be talking about H2O probably a little too much when talking about Laurie Strode, but I think that is the character's strongest moments in that movie. Because she's so broken at the beginning, she's seeing Michael Myers when he's not there. She's a booze hound.
Yeah.
I mean, just waking up in the morning, taking swigs of vodka out of the freezer.
Right.
And then, you know, getting that axe and breaking the door towards the end of the movie and going and looking for him.
For him, yeah.
Yeah. She's not running from him. She's going toward him.
Right.
To where in the original and the second one, she's running away from him. And the second one, I feel like makes her look pretty weak, because I feel like Loomis is more the final girl, quote unquote, you know, the final guy, because she's all broken up in a hospital bed and literally crawling away and hiding the whole movie. And even in the last scene, it's Loomis that takes care of Michael Myers. So
Would you say Halloween 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street 2 are final guys?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would love to give a shout out to Mark Patton for
Oh my
Nightmare
God.
on Elm Street 2.
Nicest guy ever, too.
Yeah, I love that movie. I think that movie gets shits on too much.
It does.
Much because of the end, they like defeat him with like true love or whatever, and you know, everybody maligns it for being quote unquote the gay one. But I think as a final guy, I think Mark Patton is up there with
Oh my God.
with that dude, I'm blanking on his name, from The Burning.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, like
The
if we're
Burning is so good.
talking about final guys, but this list is not about final guys. This is about the women here. So, back to Laurie Strode. I just feel like H2O shows such a stronger side of the Laurie Strode character than the first one or the second one. But I mean, you have to have her on this list. Jamie Lee Curtis brings so much to the character, especially when, you peek a little bit behind the scenes and see that in real life at the time, she was more like the totally character. Why am I blanking on her? Linda? She was more like Linda.
Oh, I gotcha.
Played by PJ Souls.
Yeah.
Than she was, Laurie Strode, the clean. And that, I think Laurie Strode is where like the whole virgin that doesn't do drugs, that's, you know, the babysitter that's saving her money and studying. I think that's where that definition of the final girl originally comes from.
100%. She's the blueprint. She was the
blueprint. She was, you know, like I say with Scream in the 90s, everybody copy and pasting. This kicked off the slasher, but then, you know, when Friday the 13th came out and added the gore element to it, then it was just, you know, smashing Friday the 13th and Halloween together, and then everybody's copy and paste, and then you had the slasher fatigue of the 80s where it was just slasher after slasher after slasher. And
some of them were really bad.
Some of them were, really. Listen, I'm one of those people that even in, you know, 2020, I have '80s slasher fatigue because there's just so many. And I'm more of a fan of '70s horror than '80s horror.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Laurie Strode has to be on this list. She's the original. She's the first. She kicks it off.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I read off my personal list, I think, you know, everybody's going to hear that just because you're the first doesn't mean I think you're the best or my favorite.
Yeah.
But she absolutely belongs on this list. And I can't fault them for putting her number one just because of everything I just said.
I agree. I 100% agree. I don't even have anything to dispute. I think Halloween is such a well put together movie that, and to me, Halloween 1 and 2 are almost one movie.
Yeah.
So, like, I know it's supposed to be 1 and 2, but they just run right into each other. It's the same night and it carries on.
Yeah.
So
aside from, you know, Friday the 13th copies the blueprint from then they copy the blueprint from Friday the 13th for part 2, getting some gore in there. And yeah, I mean, you know, you got the best of both worlds in part 2, and they run concurrently together. I'm glad that they didn't like put on the list that for the whole Halloween series she's a great final girl, because I don't think she's a great final girl in part 2.
Okay.
So
well, then
but part one and H2O, absolutely. Yeah.
I thought she was a pretty good final girl in the newest one, too.
Yes, yeah. The newest one was absolutely...
She was a great final grandma.
Yeah, final grandma. But I think the new one was a lot about passing the torch to her granddaughter.
100%.
And possibly, you know, her daughter. We'll see what happens in the next one.
Yes.
But,
bummer that got pushed back. We're not going to get into it.
They pushed back so many great movies. It's such a bummer. But, I'd rather see it with a big crowd and, you know, not risk getting sick. So it is what it is.
Agreed. Well, this is where we fight.
Yeah.
We're going to do our rankings. So we're going to re-rank the 10 that we just talked about, and then we're each going to give some honorable mentions that weren't on the list at all. So why don't you give me your bottom 3, your 10, 9, and 8?
All right, my 10, 9, and 8 for the re-ranking. My 10 and 9 shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that's been listening because, you know, I kind of shat on these movies a little bit, but I still like them. But 10 is Julie James from I Know What You Did Last Summer. I've said my piece on it. And 9, Alice Hardy from the original Friday the 13th. I just don't think she's as strong as a lot of other final girls. And if you really dig deep into the horror genre, you can just find so much better. And 8, Susie Banyan from Suspiria.
Okay. I'm actually surprised at that. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I thought that would be higher for you because you really talked that up.
Yeah.
So my number 10 is actually Susie. And yeah, so here's the reason. Because I thought that she was badass from the beginning. So to me, she didn't have to really overcome anything. She was just like, hey, guess what? You guys are talking about this chick that I ran into for 10 seconds last night, and I think I figured something out.
Yeah.
And so, like, right from the beginning...
So, yeah, she's suspicious of everything and trying to figure something out from the... Well, then she falls perfect on my list, too, towards the bottom.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. So, just had to explain that one because I love Suspiria, and I talked it up with you, and I'm like, ranking her number 10. But my number 9 was actually Jenny Field. Again, I feel like she had an edge.
Okay.
Like, she went into it like, I know things that you guys don't know.
Yeah.
And therefore... I'm, of course, going to be the one. Yeah. Because they kind of hinted at it all along. Like, I didn't have to figure out who the final girl was going to be because...
She knew about Jason. She had the child psychology on her side, fresh out of college.
Right.
So,
But again, I like all 10 of these, so it was hard for me. And number 8, I put Ripley because she is badass, and I didn't want to rank her at number 10 just because everybody tries to beat it into me because she does deserve to be higher. So I put her at number 8. What do you got for 7, 6, and 5?
All right, so 7, Nancy Thompson. But the thing is, I'm thinking of Nancy Thompson from Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
That was so good.
So, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I don't know. I think it's very underrated. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's a great practice run for Wes Craven before Scream kind of just, working out all the kinks, seeing what works and what doesn't, you know, going into such a meta script. So I like to think of it just because I just have that problem with the ending. And then of part 1, and then when you go into the sequels, it, you know, doesn't make it any better. Number 6, Sally Hardesty. She's on the lower half of the list just because, like, at the end, she's never, I don't think she got stronger. If anything, I feel like she was strong in the movie, but I feel like her character had gotten vastly weaker, especially mentally towards the end. And
I could agree with that.
It's going to take a lot of therapy. And in the 70s, they did not take that stuff seriously. So she's not going to be the same for the rest of her life. Number 5, Erin Harson from Your Next. Just, I don't really need to explain much. She is just so badass. Of course, she, like you said, I didn't even think of things like that, coming into it with an edge. And on top of that, she did have a couple people on her side before they became victims later on in the movie. But the fact that she's just so badass, and she's literally using everything to her disposal beside her. Like, she's putting nails through boards and putting them in front of windowsills so they're stepping on nails, and just like I said, home aloneing the house, you know, to you know, set these guys up before they even get a glimpse of her.
Oh, she read the McAllister Handbook.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my number 7 was Nancy also. So we're linked on that one.
All
I just, you know, she was in, like you said, she was in New Nightmare, and you can't just write her off on the first one, although she does get a little bit on your nerves in that first one.
Yeah,
so she ranked a little lower, but it's such a classic, and she is a classic character.
And something, I don't mean to interrupt, but something I forgot to say is, like, I feel like she's also kind of annoying and whiny, and just like, because she's tired through the whole thing. Like, you got to remember, these characters are not sleeping for days at a time at points in this movie. Yeah. So it kind of makes her even more badass, because she's running on fumes at the end when is home aloneing her house. So, yeah. So I forgot to put that in when we were talking about it.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's something I never actually thought of.
Yeah.
I was just in this, like, mode of, you're just a whiny high school girl. Yeah. Just, like, do what you got to do.
She's still whiny because she's not overly tired to start the movie. But
So number 6, I did put Erin, only because she only got put number 6 because of nostalgia purposes. I'm just going to say that.
All right.
But I thought she was badass. She did have, like, you know, the prior badassery before, you know, so I guess that can make her rank a little lower too, just like the others. But
who knows how long she spent on the compound? Who knows, like,
we don't get like an
maybe she was only there for a year or something.
Right.
Like, who knows if she really had that much of an edge. She just said she grew up on it. Growing up means she was there as a kid. So we didn't get much backstory. That's all the backstory we got on her.
But I will say, if there is somebody who hasn't seen this movie listening to this episode, this is the one to watch.
100% agree.
You probably have seen the other ones. This one, probably not, unless you're in the horror community.
Absolutely.
So check that one out. And then number 5, I put Alice. Just because I feel like she should break the top 5, because I think Friday the 13th really kicked off the slasher, even though people say it was Halloween. I honestly think
they kicked off the 80s slashers as they were. Like the thing is, even when you talk about Scream, there was The Craft came right before it, and they used the TV actors, and they had like the clean cinematography and everything. So like, but then Scream brought it into the slasher realm to where Friday the 13th put the gore in it.
Yes.
They really just kind of added to what Halloween had done. So I feel like slashers more so took the blueprint from Friday the 13th during the 80s, or even The Burning, which I believe was filming at the same time or like very shortly after, more so than Halloween, even though Halloween, you know, Friday the 13th took from Halloween, and then the rest I feel like mashed them both together and took both.
I can agree with that. Why don't you hit me with 4 and 3?
So 4 and 3. So number 4, I have Laurie Strode. I can probably hear a collective groan from your audience, but for her not being higher. But you know, she towards the end, she's running and hiding a lot. She's the same problem. Listen, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, number 1 or 2 in my list overall, movies overall. And you know, I had Sally Hardesty lower than Laurie Strode, even just because I don't feel like she got any stronger or learned much or, you know, what have you when it comes to that side of being a final girl. And she is running and hiding the whole movie, and she's running and hiding from like one boogeyman.
Right.
So and she has Dr. Loomis on her side and everything. So, I mean, just going back to just because you're the first, you don't have to be number one all the time. She's first, and it's great. Halloween kicked off, these slashers and everything, and really gave us what is to come in the 80s. So, Laurie Strode number 4, and number 3, I have Ellen Ripley. Okay. I mean, that survives multiple movies. She is just badass. Mm-hmm. She is the one coming up with plans, even when she goes into Aliens and she has all these men and, this other woman that seems even more badass than her. They're going with her plans. She's the one driving this ship. She's the one telling them how it's going to go. Right. And then they're kind of, standoffish about it. But then once they see what these aliens can do and see, like, she knows what she's talking about, they're like, all right, this is you. This is you. We need to be following you. Like, just the strength of that woman, just taking on the queen alien at the end of Aliens. And even, she's alone, standing up to that lone alien at the end of the first movie. Yes. So, I mean, she's completely alone by the end and, taking on something she knows nothing about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I
could see that being...
Yeah, like, she is just such a strong character in those movies. She's got to be in the top 5 for me.
Well, you're going to hate my number 4 because it's Julie James. And it's because I feel like she got more badass as the movies went on because she survived twice. And it's, to me, like, that's... you don't see a lot of final girls that keep surviving. There's a few on this list. That's why they're in the top 10.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's not really a common theme to see somebody continuously come back. And plus, like I said, it was nostalgia. It was my childhood. I remember begging my mom to take me to see the second one in theaters because I wasn't old enough to go.
I get it. I just have a problem with the movies themselves on top of, the final girl. Yeah, it is what it is. It just... I've always had a gripe. I mean, I bicker with Darcy back and forth all the time about these movies.
Oh, we're going to read her list.
I am not a fan of those two movies when it comes to making sense or like great characterizations or anything. I think they're, even when it comes to like Ryan Phillippe's character or, the what is it, the homecoming queen character of Sarah Michelle Gellar. It's just like, these are cookie cutter characters.
Well, her name's Buffy, dude.
Yeah, I know. These are just cookie cutter characters. I just don't think the movies as a whole, are much to write home about. But I know it has a huge fan base for these movies, and I'm never gonna shit on somebody for liking something. Just personally, I'm not a huge fan. Yeah. Even though I will watch that every 4th of July, but I will also clean that taste out of my mouth with Jaws afterward.
Oh, my God. Now you're talking my favorite movie, man. I could watch Jaws nonstop.
Absolutely.
Well, my number 3 is Jaws. No, I'm just kidding. So my number 3 is actually Sally. And she's beautiful. She's not badass at all. But I gave her credit for being... just surviving that family, I guess.
Taking on those crazy people is you gotta just almost get in that mindset to take on that family.
I guess she just ranked number 3 for me because she got away. Yeah. Like, I don't even care if she didn't kill him or whatever. Like, in my mind, I'm so freaked out by that movie that I'm like, good for you for living.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, why don't you give me your top 2?
All right, top two. Re-ranking the Goliath.com list again. Number 2 is Ginny Field. I mean, I just went on and on and on about her when we talked about their ranking of the list, so it should be no surprise. But just, you say she goes in having an edge. I say she still has to learn some things. She still had that genius idea of standing in front of Pamela Voorhees' head, putting on the sweater, understanding kind of how Jason might be thinking and just trying to get in his head just to survive this thing. Even afterward, you don't know if it's the dream sequence or not of her getting grabbed through the window, but when she's getting pushed into the ambulance at the end, just like Alice in the first one, I don't see them being super broken or anything. They're in the ambulance probably more for physical injuries, it seems like, than Marilyn Burns in Texas Chainsaw Massacre laughing hysterically and just not being able to, it seems like she's not going to be able to make a complete sentence for a year to come. Yeah. I don't know. It's just such a strong character. And the thing is, like I said, she does run and hide. She does have that moment where she wets her pants. She shows vulnerability. She shows that she's not 100% ironclad. So, she's just like She, I believe, is the strongest final girl that doesn't get a sequel.
Okay.
So, I wish she would have gotten a sequel. I wish they would have done something with her and the final girls in the Friday the 13th series, or even like Ted at the bar. He stays at the bar.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
I mean, there's people that survive in these movies that you just never hear from again. And
Right.
that's what I was alluding to when, I was saying that, you know, Friday the 13th, the series, when you go through the sequels concurrently, it's just like, they say nothing about it ever again.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
It's kind of a bummer when it comes to that.
And number one.
Number one, Sidney Prescott. I mean,
Yeah, we gushed over that one, right?
what more is there to say about her? She's just, and the thing is, she has to learn new things every time because, yes, it's Ghostface every time. Like, the difference between her and like a Laurie Strode is Laurie Strode knows Michael Myers.
Yes.
It's the same Michael Myers.
Every time.
Like, yeah, he might be a little more like boogeyman or undead as the series goes on or whatever, but Sidney, you don't know who Ghostface is in part 2.
Right.
You don't know if there's 2, 3, 4, 5 different people. You don't know who, and the thing is, they all die at the end.
Yes.
So it's never gonna be somebody
Right.
that's the same.
She's dealing with somebody different or multiple different people in each movie.
And you don't know how they're working. Right. Like you
don't know if they're close to you.
So she comes through with experience with dealing with psychopathic people.
Right.
But like, you don't know how each individual psycho is going to work. You don't know what their motives are. You don't, and what their motives are might decide how motivated they are to getting her. And you really have to relearn as the sequels go on.
And it shows in is it her boyfriend again?
Yeah.
And she has that moment of like, what if it is?
Part 2, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just don't, and like finding out that he had nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's just, but then she's thinking, and all the 2 killers in part 2 were so careful to leave these shadows of doubt in her mind of, oh, look, this happened with Billy Loomis, so are you sure it's not happening with him?
Right, exactly.
So,
and shout out to Courtney Cox Bangs.
Oh, yeah, in part 3, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you this. My top 2 are Laurie is 2, and Sidney is also my number 1.
Oh, there you go.
We did agree on the number 1. But the reason I picked Sidney over Laurie is the same thing we're talking about right now, because she's more badass. She has to adapt more, and she continues to survive while adapting to different killers each time.
Absolutely.
Same mask, different person behind it. Not the same mind. She's going through it every single time with a new person. So that was actually my deciding
and even
factor.
like when you go to part 3, like she didn't even know who this person was.
Right.
In part 3.
Right.
Like, yeah, that movie doesn't make sense, and they needed 2 killers because there were points in the movie where he needed to be at 2 places at once in order for it to make sense. But I mean, she didn't even know who that guy was in part 3. So, and on top of it, like he had the bulletproof vest and everything, and it's just like, she shot him. Yeah. Like, and then you go to part 4, it's like,
that threw me off.
Yeah. She obviously knew who these 2 people were before, she found out they were the ones under the Scream mask, but she didn't know how they worked. She wasn't like close to them. You just got to adapt and really, and going through the same exact thing, and the only thing that changes is the places. Yeah. 4 times, and we'll see what happens a 5th time. I'm so excited for this 5th one.
Oh my god, me too.
I'm so excited.
I almost did a backflip when I saw it.
I know. and the guys doing Ready or Not are directing it, and I thought Ready or Not was fantastic. It was a breath of fresh air at a time where theatrical horror again, minus the A24 movies, kind of sneaking their ways into theaters. And Jordan Peele's joints getting in there. Where horror tends, to get a little streaky. Yeah. In theaters, but yeah.
Well, before we move on from this, I want you to read Darcy's 10-1.
All right, here we go. So we have Darcy's 10-1 right here because I definitely saved it. So here we go. Darcy's 10-1. She didn't go off the list. She went off her personal 10-1.
Oh, okay.
So
hit it.
What she has is 10, Nancy, A Nightmare on Elm Street. 9, Gale Weathers from the Scream series.
Okay.
8, Kristen from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. 7, Kirsty from the first 2 Hellraiser movies.
Okay.
6, Mary Beth Dunstan from Hatchet.
All right.
1 through 3. 5, Aaron from You're Next. 4, Grace from Ready or Not.
Okay.
3, Ginny from Friday the 13th Part 2.
Okay.
Laurie Strode, specifically from Halloween 1, 2 to H2O.
And Sidney Prescott.
I mean, and her honorable mentions were Julie James from the I Know What You Did Last Summer series. Alice from A Nightmare on Elm Street 4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Jamie Lloyd from Halloween 4 and 5. Tina from Friday the 13th Part 7.
There you go.
And her curveball, Samantha from House of the Devil.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She's a really big fan of that one. And
you want to hear something funny?
Huh.
A lot of my honorable mentions you just said.
Oh, nice. I knew when it came to honorable mentions and stuff off the list, we'd have a couple of repeats because, I mean, these final girls are just, I mean, they're great.
Why don't we do some honorable mentions here? I got 10 of them.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you my 10, 9, and 8 right now.
Okay.
Because, well, you'll see.
Well, I have 10 of my personal list, so we'll just go 3 for 3 then.
Let's do it.
Sure.
So, my number 10, final girl, is Allison from Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh, that's awesome. Man, I didn't even think of that. I pulled out that movie the other day, too, and didn't watch it yet, but...
Curveball, right?
Yeah, that's a great one. Oh, man, she is great in that.
So, my number 9 is Elvira from both of her movies.
I haven't seen the second one of her movies, but Elvira, Mistress of the Dark is wonderfully hilarious and charming.
Great final girl in Haunted Hills. So, we'll keep
I still have to watch that one.
Number 8, Mrs. Brody from Jaws.
Come on. Mrs. Brody. I was just going to make fun of her and be like, when we mentioned Jaws, and say, there wasn't a final girl in there unless you count Mrs. Brody.
But this is why I picked it. Because in Jaws the Revenge, the shark was
Jaws the Revenge, yes. I do love that one.
The shark was clearly a slasher.
That's
He was out for Mrs. Brody. Yes. He followed her boat.
He followed her to her vacation spot with a guy with a fake Jamaican accent. The worst fake Jamaican accent. Worse than Jack Black, and I still Know What You Did Last Summer.
So I just had to get that out there because I knew you would appreciate those 3
man,
first.
That's hilarious. I actually love Jaws the Revenge.
Me too.
Oh man, that's
I knew you
a Christmas movie too. I watch it during Christmas.
It is. All right, give me your 10, 9, and 8.
All right, my 10, 9, and 8 for my personal list is 10, Sally Hardesty from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep.
Obviously, she's a little low, and I've explained that twice already, going through our re-ranking in the Goliath list. And my number 9, this is my horror hipster pick. So it's Angel, played by Rosie Day, from a movie called The Seasoning House from 2012. To introduce it possibly to some of your listeners, I took a picture of the backs of the Blu-ray case just so I could read what it's about. It is, where young girls are kidnapped and prostituted to the military, Angel, played by Rosie Day, an orphan deaf-mute, is enslaved to care for her fellow victims. She moves between the walls and crawl spaces, planning her escape, planning her ingenious and brutal revenge.
Wow.
This is a little mousy, deaf-mute girl taking on a foreign military to save people who she essentially grooms and gets ready for. This guy runs essentially a horror house. Yeah. And forces these women, kidnaps them, forces them into prostitution during war times, and prostitutes them to military men that come in. He dopes them up. He has this little girl get them ready, clean them up, put makeup on them, dope them up. Gotcha. And then they come in, and it's essentially a rape revenge movie without the person getting the revenge being raped. At least you don't see it on screen. Okay. It alludes to the person running the house. Right. Possibly had at one point raped her, but it doesn't show it. But there's, it is absolutely a thrilling movie. It is a horror thriller. I will definitely check I recommend it. It's a rough watch. Like, I'm sure, full disclosure, I've only seen it 2 times. I saw it the first time when it came out back in 2012, and then this was only the second time I watched it when I pulled it out like 2 or 3 nights ago, threw it on, and I was like, wow, this cannot not make my list. Right. Because, she's a little girl too, just taking on. And these aren't just like random dudes that sign up for the military. These are big, huge. Right. Like one of them's a big, jacked, muscly dude that she kind of has to sneak up on him and get her revenge. But I'm not going to say any more about it because I recommend it to everybody. I don't think it's streaming anywhere, but you can rent it places. I think it's like $3.99 on most rental digital platforms. Or the Blu-ray is like $10 or $15. Just buy it. Support this movie. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite, of the last 10 years. So number 8, I have Danny from Midsommar that came out last year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So this movie, it's just like, you could not beat down somebody more than when this movie starts off. She loses her entire family. She's surrounded by nobody but shitbags. Nobody has her back. Her boyfriend is the worst. And then she just, accidentally inserts herself to go check out this, cult-like commune. And the commune essentially kind of like welcomes her with open arms. She becomes this thing called the May Queen, and then essentially sheds all of the bullshit in her life and straight up, just at one point she has a choice whether to sacrifice her boyfriend or some random cult member that volunteered. And she's just like, whatever, I'm getting rid of all this baggage, chooses her boyfriend. And just like, if you have not seen Midsommar, don't get scared off by like the 2.5 hour runtime. It's a slow movie. It's a beautiful movie though. It's horrific, and it's all daytime shots.
Oh, okay.
It's all
okay.
because I
haven't seen it. I've only read about it.
Yeah, I think it takes place in Finland for the most part. They start off in the US, but then they go to Finland. And, yeah, their days are like, at the time, the way the seasons were, I think they were like 18 or 19 hour days. So it all takes place during the day. And
okay.
It's an amazing movie. I absolutely love it. I've watched the regular cut twice and the 3-hour director's cut twice since it came out. So,
well, I'm going to hit you with number 7 through 4 right now, and then we'll do our top 3s.
Awesome.
So my number 7 is Tree from Happy Death Day.
Oh, she was on my watch list. I watched it. I absolutely agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 6, Grace from Ready or Not.
I love it. I love it.
Number 5, Taylor Gentry from Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Awesome. I agree with your list. Our lists are very different, but I agree with your list.
Here's a curveball for you. I don't know if you would have thought of this one or not. Tuffy from Feast.
I watched Feast the other night.
Did you really?
Yes, I watched Feast. Except randomly, I was thinking, because she was a final girl, but I thought when Heroine number 2 came on screen, I was like, I think that might be my final girl for Heroine number 2.
Feast is one of my favorite movies.
So fun. Like, I have a blast watching it.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah. Even the third one, which is just like
super out there.
Oh, it's so out there. But I have so much fun watching those movies. They're junk food movies to me. I can put them on at any time, and it's just going to hit the spot. Oh, yeah, that little thing.
Well, hit me with your 7 to 4.
All right, 7 to 4. 7. Aaron, from You're Next.
Yes.
I mean, we've said what we need to say on that. Grace from Ready or Not is my 6 as well.
Wow, okay.
I put her in the same exact category as Aaron, except the only reason I feel like she's a little stronger, she doesn't have backup from the family like Aaron had, and she didn't grow up on a survivalist camp.
Right.
So she's just a regular chick that just, has everybody against her. Even when she tries to call the cops, they said, oh, this car was reported stolen, so we got to shut it off. And then she's back to square one. So, wow. And then my number 5 is Laurie Strode, specifically from Halloween H2O. If I had to pick one movie, if I'm picking parts of the series, it would be 1, 2 to H2O. Okay. Nothing more to say about her. I've said my piece on that. And number 4 is Barbara, played by Patricia Tallman from Night of the Living Dead 1990.
Oh, really?
1990.
Yeah.
Barbara from the first Night of the Living Dead gets on my nerves.
Yeah.
I don't like how she was written. I mean, it was the 60s. She was written like this little meek woman. She's, it just seems like she's mentally weak from the beginning, even when she's just talking to Johnny
in the car. Yeah,
and I'm just like, this is not how I like to see my ladies in horror movies written. Ugh. But then George A. Romero actually had part in writing the screenplay for the remake.
Yes.
So he righted his wrong.
Yes.
And, he made her a million times stronger. He even made, I feel like he even held back on making the character of Ben as strong to kind of highlight how strong Barbara is in that remake. She's absolutely badass in that movie.
Fair.
And I mean, if you're out there and you're just like, oh, Night of the Living Dead remake, and just like the remake part of it scares you off, watch it again. I mean, one of the best remakes ever made.
I think so.
Yeah, it's Tom Savini directed.
Oh, he's so good.
Oh my God. And the effects are top notch too, because you got Tom Savini directing it. So
100%. All right, here it is. our top 3 of our personal 10. My number 3, Gale Weathers.
Oh, man. You and Darce. That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
I think, right along with Sydney, Gale gets more badass as they go.
Yeah.
And she survives every single movie along with Sydney. And it's not... You don't see that a lot, where there's 2 final girls in the movie. And not only was there 2 in the movie, there was 2 in 4 movies.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool.
She's just such an asshole.
Yeah, right. So my number 2 and my number 1 are both played by Danielle Harris.
Oh!
My number 2 is Jamie Lloyd.
I think I know who your number 1 is.
Mary Beth
from Hatchet.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Those are great final girls.
I shot you with this list.
You did. You really did. I love Danielle Harris in Halloween 4. I hate Halloween 5.
Yeah, Halloween 5 isn't as good.
I do not like it. Like, I have a tough time of whether or not that's my least favorite or Resurrection. That's how much I do not like that movie.
Resurrection was bad, dude.
It's really bad, but I at least have fun watching that movie. And the thing is, like, 5 has that 80s charm. So that's why it's like I have a So Bad It's Fun with Resurrection, and I have a 80s charm with 5. So I just put them tied for the worst at the end of the day. So my 3, and when I texted you maybe last week or something, and was when I was going through rewatching all of these movies, and I was like, man, I can't find, my horror hipster pick that, comes out of the blue that a lot of people haven't heard of, because these classics just have such staying power. Mm-hmm. These characters are so well written. These movies are just top notch, and it's going to be boring because it's the same top 3 I have from my re-rank Goliath list. It's Ellen Ripley, Ginny, and Sidney Prescott.
That's awesome.
So,
but that just goes to show how great that list was.
Yeah, they're just so classic. Yeah. I couldn't do anything different. After watching these movies, while I do love, my independent horror and supporting stuff like that, Friday the 13th too was kind of an independent movie, but at the time,
yeah, but my list would have had a lot of them on it too, but I did just 10 that weren't.
Yeah.
But a lot of mine would have been the same too, so...
Yeah, well, I do have honorable mentions. That was my official top 10 for my personal taste. So my honorable mentions... What do I have, 5 or 6? Yeah. My honorable mentions, Susie Banyan, we've talked about her.
Yep.
She's in my honorable mentions. Nancy Thompson from New Nightmare.
Yep.
We've talked about her. Alice from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4.
Okay.
I had just watched it, and I don't like A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4.
Okay.
I don't like the movie. But she's great. She's great in it. Her character development is great. Her rise to defeat Freddy is great. I think the way they defeat Freddy is dumb. But, just what she has to go through to get him. And it's kind of cool how her friends that were involved in Part 3, as they become victims of Freddy, she gains like a power of theirs.
Yeah.
So she gets stronger through that, and then like she knows how to use them. Great character. Probably one of my least favorite entries in the series, but great character. Sarah from The Descent.
Oh, wow.
The reason she's not in my top 10 is because the UK cut, she doesn't make it out.
Oh, okay.
But they thought, Lionsgate thought it was too dark to have for US crowds.
Okay.
So, they had her make it out in the American cut.
Got it.
But the UK cut is, what's the guy's name? Not Neil Jordan. That's Interview with Vampire. Neil something. He did a bunch of Game of Thrones episodes and stuff like that. But, Neil Marshall. I take Neil Marshall's ending as the UK cut. So she doesn't make it out in that. That's why she's an honorable mention. She doesn't die on screen in the movie.
Right, but
she doesn't make it out of the caves.
Okay.
And then my last one is Kirsty Cotton from the Hellraiser series. Yeah. You're taking on an army of Cenobites, demons. So, to make it out of that, 2 movies in a row, there's something that has to be said for her.
Agreed. So, well, this was fun, man. That was a lot of fun.
This was awesome. I had tons of fun. I had fun because I'm a person that I don't rewatch movies a lot because I look to just find new stuff a lot. So I got to revisit so many movies, and I'm going through the rest of this list for my October watch list, the ones I didn't hit up.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, maybe we might have to do something else with
maybe. I have a few, like I said, I'd mentioned Valentine earlier. That was on my list. The Guest is on my list. what else, like Jennifer's Body, Happy Death Day, both
Death
of them,
Day,
like that you brought up. Like there's a few of these final girls, The Blob.
I'm going through all the Hammer horror right now.
Oh, that's awesome. I love Hammer horror. I love Hammer horror so much, but they're just such chill movies that they make me so sleepy. It's not because they're boring. It's just...
They're fun.
Yeah, they're fun, but they're just like...
Yeah,
there's not a lot of action in them.
No.
So I gotta watch them fresh when I wake up after like a coffee or a can of Monster or something.
Well, dude, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me. This was a blast, and I don't know. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
This was great.
Maybe we should just leave Chaz out always. Hang on, I got to turn this off.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. All right, guys, thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Mike.
Later.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.